The ball opens. No one noticed the Omega on her knees. While 50 rivals in jeweled gowns spun beneath chandeliers, Belle scrubbed at a wine stain as if her life depended on it. Her honey-blonde curls clung to her damp forehead, green eyes sharp with defiance even as her plain servant's dress clung to her wiry frame. Her golden-brown skin glowed faintly in the candlelight, but no one looked twice. She wasn't here to dazzle. She was here to survive. At the center of the ballroom, Alpha King Roderick moved like a storm contained in human form. Broad-shouldered, towering, his bronze skin gleamed beneath the torchlight. Dark hair framed a face carved in sharp lines, and when his golden eyes swept the room, Omegas trembled. His smile was a weapon, dangerous, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Tonight, 50 Omegas had come to claim him. Belle wrung out her rag, jaw tight. She knew that smile. She'd seen it melt noble daughters into puddles, watched it unravel the proudest wolves until they were begging for scraps of his attention. He collected hearts the way other men collected trophies, carelessly, greedily, and with no thought for the wreckage left behind. How many has he ruined already, she thought bitterly. How many girls left in tears, convinced they were the one, only to be discarded the moment his golden eyes wandered. The council called him charming. Belle called him reckless, dangerous, a man who wielded affection like a blade, cutting down anyone foolish enough to believe in it. And yet, when his gaze locked on her, the poor Omega crouched on the floor. The air shifted. For a heartbeat, Belle's chest tightened, traitorous warmth stirring where only scorn should live. She scowled, forcing herself to remember the truth. Alpha King Roderick was a man who changed women like gloves, and she would never, ever be one of them. Across the ballroom, Roderick's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. He raised his goblet in her direction, as though toasting her alone. Belle's stomach dropped. She ducked her head, scrubbing harder, praying no one else had noticed. But she knew better. The Alpha King never looked at anyone without purpose, and tonight, he had looked at her. Welcome back, moon lovers. Tonight, the ballroom opens and fate begins to stir. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The bond is just beginning. Chapter 1. Move aside, girl. Belle jerked her rag back just in time as a nobleman's polished boot nearly crushed her fingers. His scent hit her first, sharp, arrogant, laced with expensive cologne. Is there a reason you're groveling in my path? He sneered, looking down at her as though she were dirt. Belle tilted her head, green eyes flashing. To polish your boots with my skin, perhaps. Why else? A few nearby Omegas tittered behind jeweled fans. The noble's face darkened, but before he could retort, a ripple passed through the crowd. Alpha King Roderick had turned. The golden-eyed king cut through the sea of gowns with predatory ease, his smile slow and deliberate. The noble stiffened, paling as Roderick's shadow fell over them both. Lord Kellen, Roderick said, voice smooth as silk over steel. I believe the Emberwood delegation is searching for you. The man bowed stiffly and retreated without another word. Belle might have thanked Roderick, if he hadn't been Roderick. Well, Freckles, the king drawled, his gaze dropping to her crouched form. Enjoying your evening? Belle ignored him, scrubbing harder. She knew exactly what ignoring him did. It drove him mad. That stain coming out as you hoped? He pressed, voice laced with amusement. Belle's jaw clenched. She refused to look up. From the corner of her eye, she caught the deliberate tilt of his goblet. Red wine spilled across the marble, pooling at her knees. Oh, how clumsy of me, Roderick murmured, lips curving into a grin that dared her to react. Belle snapped her head up, glare sharp enough to cut. Don't you have other people to torment? Like one of the 50 Omegas who came here just to worship you? They're not nearly as fun as you, he countered smoothly. Besides, I can hardly ask them to clean up after me, can I? A ripple of laughter passed through the nearby crowd. Belle's cheeks burned, though not from embarrassment, from fury. Your Majesty, a voice purred. Lady Seraphina glided forward, raven hair gleaming, violet eyes fixed adoringly on the king. She pressed a crystal goblet into his hand. Allow me to fetch you another drink. Belle's stomach twisted. Seraphina, flawless, ambitious, and utterly shameless. Roderick had discarded her months ago, yet here she was, tail practically wagging. Roderick accepted the goblet without looking at Seraphina. His golden eyes never left Belle. "Freckles," he said softly, almost intimately. "Fetch me one of those strawberry tarts from the table." Belle rose stiffly, rag clenched in her fist. Fine. She would. Because it was her duty, not because she was eager. Entirely different from Seraphina's display. Entirely. From across the hall, Jace, the king's valet, appeared at her side, tugging nervously at his livery. "Can you believe it?" he whispered. "Our king, engaged tonight." Belle snorted. "That man can't keep his attention on a woman for more than a week. He's not about to do it for life." Jace winced, glancing toward the king. "Careful, someone might hear you." Belle's gaze flicked back to Roderick, who was already dancing with another Omega, his smile dazzling, his hand firm at her waist. And yet, even as he twirled the girl across the floor, his golden eyes found Belle again. Her stomach dropped, because she knew. He was watching her, not the girl in his arms. Chapter 2. The music faltered. One moment, Alpha King Roderick was gliding across the floor with a laughing Omega in his arms, golden eyes gleaming beneath the chandeliers. The next, his steps stumbled. His hand slipped from his partner's waist, his goblet clattered to the marble, and the great Alpha King swayed like a man struck down by an unseen blow. Gasps tore through the ballroom. "Assassins!" someone screamed. Guards surged forward, steel flashing as they formed a wall around their king. Courtiers shrank back, silks rustling, jewels clinking, the air thick with panic. Belle froze, rag still in her hand, heart hammering. Then instinct took over. She pushed through the wall of bodies, ignoring the shouts, until she was at his side. "Step away from His Majesty," a guard barked, reaching for her arm. Belle yanked free, green eyes blazing. "Don't be ridiculous, Lawrence. It's me." "Captain's orders," he muttered, torn. "Tell Theon he can choke on his orders," Belle snapped, dropping to her knees beside Roderick. His bronze skin was pale beneath the torchlight, his golden eyes unfocused. Belle pressed trembling fingers to his throat. Relief surged, his pulse was steady. Not poison, not death, something else. "Roderick," she whispered, clutching his hand. "If you can hear me, squeeze my fingers." Nothing. "Make way for the healer." A wiry woman with silver-streaked hair pushed through the crowd. Madame Leanie, the royal healer. She knelt briskly, but Belle's gaze had already shifted. The goblet. It lay on its side, crimson wine pooling across the marble. Belle snatched it up, lifted it to her nose. Beneath the sharp tang of wine lingered something floral, cloying, wrong. Her wolf stirred uneasily. Her eyes swept the hall and landed on Lady Seraphina. Belle's stomach twisted. Seraphina stood near the doors, wringing her jeweled hands, violet eyes wide. She had given him that drink. Their gazes collided and Seraphina flinched. "It was her!" Belle shouted, pointing. Her voice cracked like a whip. "She poisoned the king!" The ballroom froze. Seraphina's lips parted, trembling. "It's not what you think," she cried. "He'll be fine. I can help him." The crowd erupted again, voices clashing, accusations flying. Captain Theon's hand went to his sword. Belle surged forward, fury burning hot in her chest. "What did you do to him?" she demanded, seizing Seraphina's shoulders. "What's in that drink?" Seraphina's eyes darted wildly. "It's not poison," she blurted. "It's—" Leanie's calm voice cut through the storm. "He's asleep." "Asleep?" Belle echoed, disbelief sharp in her tone. "Yes," Seraphina said quickly, seizing the lifeline. "See, he's perfectly fine, just resting." Belle's wolf snarled inside her. "You drugged him at a royal ball?" she roared. "That's not love. That's treachery." Seraphina's chin lifted, defiance flickering. "It wasn't poison. It was a love potion." The words dropped like stones into the silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the ballroom exploded into chaos. Chapter 3. The ballroom roared like a storm. Nobles shouted, Omegas wept, and the guards' steel rang as they tried to contain the chaos. The word love potion hung in the air like smoke, choking every whispered conversation. Lady Seraphina stood tall in the center of it all, raven hair gleaming, violet eyes burning with defiance. Her porcelain skin flushed as she lifted her chin, daring anyone to challenge her. It was not poison, she declared, voice trembling but loud enough to carry. It was proof of love. Belle's stomach twisted. Proof? She wanted to laugh, but fury burned hotter. This woman drugged the Alpha King in front of half the realm, and she dares to call it love? Then prove it, Captain Theon growled, hand on his sword. If His Majesty truly loves you, wake him. The hall fell silent. Seraphina's violet eyes softened as she knelt beside Roderick's still form. She cupped his jaw with trembling hands, her voice breaking into a whisper, meant for the crowd as much as for him. My love, come back to me. She pressed her lips to his. The room held its breath. Nothing. Roderick's chest rose and fell, steady but unchanged. His golden eyes remained closed. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Seraphina's face tightened. She leaned down again, this time kissing him with desperate passion, her jeweled bracelets clinking as she clutched him. Still nothing. The whispers grew louder, sharper. It didn't work. He doesn't love her. Then who? Belle realized she was holding her breath. Relief and dread tangled in her chest. Relief that Seraphina had failed. Dread because the question now hung heavy in the air. If not Seraphina, then who? The council of elders stepped forward, their gray robes sweeping the marble. Elder Marcellus, his voice cold as stone, raised a hand. Enough. The king's condition is a disgrace to this court. The competition will continue. He must choose a mate before the moon wanes, or the stability of this kingdom will shatter. Belle's jaw clenched. Stability. That's all they cared about. Not him, not the truth. But he cannot even stand, someone protested. Then he will stand when he must, Marcellus snapped. His gaze swept the hall, landing briefly on Belle with thinly veiled disdain. And this servant Omega will remember her place. Belle's fist tightened at her sides. She wanted to scream, to tell them she had seen the way Roderick's eyes had sought her even as he danced with others. But she bit her tongue, because across the marble floor, Roderick stirred. His lips parted, a faint sound escaping. His golden eyes fluttered open for the briefest moment, hazy and unfocused. And then, with a voice so faint only Belle could hear, he whispered her name. Belle. The world seemed to stop. Then his eyes closed again, and the ballroom erupted into chaos once more. Chapter 4. The ballroom had not recovered from the shock of the king whispering Belle's name. Whispers slithered through the crowd like snakes, each one sharper than the last. Did you hear? He called for her. The maid? Impossible. He must have been delirious. Belle kept her head down, but her cheeks burned. Every glance felt like a dagger. She wanted to vanish into the marble floor, but Roderick's voice still echoed in her chest, low and raw. Belle. Across the hall, Lady Seraphina's violet eyes locked on her. The noble Omega's beauty was flawless, raven hair cascading in glossy waves, porcelain skin glowing under the chandeliers, but her expression was venom. She had knelt before the king, kissed him twice, and failed. And now, the poor Omega she despised was the name on everyone's lips. Seraphina glided forward, her gown whispering across the floor like silk over steel. She stopped just short of Belle, her smile sweet enough to curdle. Enjoying the attention? She murmured, voice low enough for only Belle to hear. Don't mistake pity for power. He'll never choose you. Belle straightened, rag still clutched in her hand. Funny, she said coolly. I don't recall asking for his attention. Unlike some people, I don't need to drug a man to get him to look my way. Seraphina's smile faltered, her violet eyes flashing. For a heartbeat, Belle thought she might strike her. Instead, Seraphina leaned closer, her perfume cloying, her words a hiss. You'll regret crossing me. I don't lose. Before Belle could retort, the council of elders swept into the center of the hall, their gray robes heavy with authority. Elder Marcellus raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "The competition will continue," he declared. 50 Omegas remain. His Majesty will choose a mate before the moon wanes. That is the law. Murmurs rippled. Some Omegas straightened their spines, emboldened. Others glanced nervously at Belle, as though she had already stolen what they came for. Belle's stomach twisted. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted his gaze, his smile, his whispered name. And yet, she could feel Seraphina's hatred burning into her back, the council's disdain pressing down like a weight, and the eyes of 50 rivals sharpening with envy. She swallowed hard, forcing her chin up. Survive, she told herself. Just survive this night. But deep down, she knew survival would no longer be enough. Chapter 5. The music never returned. The ballroom, once alive with laughter and silk, now pulsed with unease. Guards lingered at every corner, their hands never straying far from their blades. The council's decree still echoed in the air. The competition will continue. Belle kept to the shadows, rag still clutched in her hand, though her heart hadn't slowed since Roderick had whispered her name. She could feel the weight of 50 stares pressing into her back. Suspicion, envy, hatred. Across the hall, Lady Seraphina stood like a queen already crowned. Her violet eyes glittered with fury, her porcelain face composed into a mask of serenity. But Belle saw the truth in the tightness of her jaw, the way her jeweled fingers dug into her skirts. Seraphina had failed to wake him, and the humiliation burned. "She'll pay for this," Seraphina murmured to a cluster of noble Omegas at her side. Belle caught the words, sharp as knives, though Seraphina's smile never faltered. Belle turned away, forcing herself to focus on the king. Roderick had been carried to a high-backed chair at the edge of the hall, his golden eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. He looked almost peaceful, but Belle knew better. His wolf was restless. She could feel it, a low hum in the air, like a storm pressing against the walls. Madame Leanie bent over him, muttering incantations, her hands glowing faintly with healer's light. "It's no ordinary sleep," she said at last, her voice grim. "The potion binds him, his wolf fights it, but the tether is strong." Belle's stomach twisted. A king who cannot wake. A kingdom waiting for his choice. And 50 rivals circling like vultures. "Perhaps," Elder Marcellus said, his cold gaze sweeping the room. "This is the god's way of forcing his majesty to decide. If true love is the key, then let the Omegas prove themselves." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Some straightened their gowns, others whispered prayers. Belle's jaw clenched. She hadn't come here to compete. She hadn't come here to be noticed. And yet, she was already at the center of it all. Roderick stirred suddenly, his head lolling to the side, his lips parted, a low growl escaping. Belle's heart leapt. She stepped forward instinctively, ignoring the guard's protests. "Roderick," she whispered, crouching beside him. "Fight it. Come back." For a heartbeat, his golden eyes flickered open. They locked on hers, hazy but burning, and his hand twitched as though reaching for her. Then, just as quickly, the light faded, and he slumped back into the chair. The hall erupted in whispers again. Belle's chest tightened. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that this wasn't over. The potion was only the beginning. And Seraphina, beautiful, ruthless Seraphina, would not rest until Belle was destroyed. Chapter 6. The ballroom seethed like a hive struck with a stone. Nobles shouted over one another, their jeweled hands gesturing wildly, while foreign ambassadors demanded answers in clipped, furious tones. The word love potion hissed through the air like a curse, staining every whispered conversation. "It's forbidden," one voice cried. "An insult to the crown," another spat. "Witchcraft." Lady Seraphina stood at the center of the storm, her violet eyes blazing, her porcelain face pale but proud. Raven hair spilled over her jeweled shoulders as she lifted her chin, refusing to bow. "I did it for love," she declared, her voice trembling but defiant. "I would never harm him. I only wanted to prove what already exists between us. Belle's stomach twisted. Love? The word tasted bitter. She stepped forward before she could stop herself, her voice cutting through the din. You drugged the Alpha King in front of half the realm. That isn't love. That's desperation. Gasps rippled. Dozens of eyes turned to her. Seraphina's head snapped toward Belle, fury flashing. And what would you know of love, little maid? She hissed. He will never choose you. The council swept forward, their gray robes heavy with judgment. Elder Martellus raised his hand, silencing the hall with a single gesture. Enough. Lady Seraphina, your actions are a disgrace. The use of such potions is forbidden. Were it not for your noble blood, you would already be in chains. Seraphina's chin lifted higher, her voice sharp as glass. Then chain me, but know this. The king's heart is mine, and no law can change that. The hall erupted again, voices clashing like steel. Belle's pulse thundered. She wanted to fade into the shadows, but then a low growl rumbled from the high-backed chair. Roderick stirred. His golden eyes flickered open, hazy but burning, and for the second time that night, they found Belle. Belle, he whispered, before slumping back into silence. The hall froze. Seraphina's face drained of color, and Belle knew, with a chill that sank into her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7. The silence after Roderick's whisper was suffocating. Then, like a dam breaking, the hall erupted. He called her again! The maid? Impossible! He must be delirious! The words lashed through the ballroom like whips. Belle's cheeks burned as dozens of eyes turned toward her. She wanted to vanish into the marble floor, but Elder Marcellus's voice cut through the storm like a blade. Enough! His gray robes swept around him as he strode to the dais. The king's wolf has spoken, but whispers are not proof. The bond must be tested. The first trial begins now. A hush fell. The kiss, Marcellus declared. One by one, each Omega will step forward. If her bond is true, His Majesty will wake. A ripple of anticipation swept through the crowd. The Omegas straightened their gowns, painted lips trembling with hope and hunger. Nobles leaned forward, eager for spectacle. Ambassadors whispered of scandal and succession. Belle's stomach twisted. She wasn't part of this. She wasn't supposed to be. And yet, she could feel Seraphina's violet gaze burning into her, daring her to flinch. The first Omega stepped forward. She bowed, pressed her lips to the king's, and waited. Nothing. The king's chest rose and fell, steady but unchanged. His golden eyes remained closed. The hall murmured. Another Omega tried, then another, and another. Each kiss ended the same way. Silence, failure, shame. Some women left the dais with tears streaking their painted faces. Others forced brittle smiles, pretending their failure meant nothing. But the truth was clear. Seraphina had failed, and now so had they. Belle lingered at the edge of the hall, rag still clutched in her hand. She wasn't part of this trial. No one expected her to be. And yet, every time Roderick stirred, every time his wolf growled low in his chest, his golden eyes flickered toward her. And with each failed kiss, the weight of inevitability pressed closer. Chapter 8. The line of Omegas stretched like a procession of hope and vanity. One after another they stepped forward, gowns whispering across the marble, jewels catching the light. Each bowed, pressed painted lips to the king's, and waited. Nothing. The king's chest rose and fell, steady but unchanged. His golden eyes remained closed. The murmurs grew sharper with every failure. Another one wasted. Does he love none of them? Perhaps the bond does not exist at all. By the 10th attempt, the air was thick with perfume and disappointment. By the 20th, the whispers had soured into ridicule. By the 30th, even the most ambitious Omegas faltered, their confidence cracking under the weight of silence. Lady Seraphina stood apart, her violet eyes fixed on the dais. Every failure was a balm to her wounded pride, but also a torment. She had kissed him first and failed. Now, with each rival's humiliation, her own echoed louder. The council watched with stony faces, though unease flickered in their eyes. Elder Marcellus's jaw tightened as yet another Omega stepped back in tears. "The gods test us," he muttered, though his voice carried no conviction. And through it all, Belle's absence was a presence of its own. Her name lingered in every whisper, her face in every sideways glance. She was not there, yet the memory of the king's voice, Belle, hung heavier than the chandeliers above. By the 40th kiss, the hall had soured into desperation. Some Omegas clutched his hand, whispering prayers. Others pressed their lips harder, as if force could summon love. Still, the king did not stir. The silence after each attempt grew heavier, more damning. And as the 49th Omega stepped forward, trembling, the truth pressed down on the hall like a storm. 50 women had tried, 50 had failed. The bond lay elsewhere. Chapter 9. The 49th Omega stepped back, her jeweled gown heavy with shame, her painted lips trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every chosen Omega had tried. Everyone had failed. The Alpha King remained unmoved, his golden eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in that same steady rhythm. His wolf growled low in his chest, restless, unsatisfied. The hall erupted. "This is madness! The gods mock us! Without a mate, the kingdom will fall!" Nobles shouted over one another, their jeweled hands slicing the air. Ambassadors muttered of instability, of treaties broken and enemies emboldened. The air was thick with fear and fury. The council huddled at the dais, their gray robes whispering as they argued in harsh tones. Elder Marcellus's face was carved from stone, but unease flickered in his eyes. "The bond exists," he snapped, though his voice carried no conviction. "It must." Lady Seraphina seized the moment. She swept forward, her violet eyes blazing, her raven hair gleaming like a crown. "Do you not see?" she cried, her voice ringing through the hall. "The king's heart is already bound, to me. The potion clouded his wolf, but his love remains. That is why no other succeeds." Gasps rippled. Some nodded, desperate for an explanation. Others sneered, remembering her failure. A foreign ambassador scoffed. "If his heart is yours, why did he not wake to your kiss?" Seraphina's porcelain face flushed, but she lifted her chin. "Because the gods punish me for daring to prove what was already true. They test my devotion. But I will not be cast aside. I am his chosen." Her words rang bold, but the silence that followed was heavier still, because everyone remembered the whisper. Belle. Her absence was louder than Seraphina's defiance. Every sideways glance, every hushed murmur circled back to the same truth. The king had not called for Seraphina. He had not called for any of them. He had called for the maid. Chapter 10. Far from the glittering chandeliers and the suffocating perfume of the ballroom, the servants' quarters buzzed with hushed voices. The maids huddled together, skirts brushing the stone floor, their hands still red from scrubbing and serving. "They all failed," one whispered, eyes wide. "Every last one of them." 49 Omegas, another said, shaking her head. And not a single stir. Not even Seraphina. The words hung heavy in the air. Belle sat on the edge of a wooden bench, rag still clutched in her hand. She kept her head down, but she could feel their eyes on her. The memory of his voice, Belle, still echoed in her chest, low and raw. "They say he called your name," a younger maid blurted, her voice trembling with awe. "Twice." Belle's stomach twisted. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but the truth was written in every whisper, every glance. "Don't be foolish," an older maid snapped, though her voice wavered. "He was delirious. The king doesn't call for the likes of her." But even as she said it, her gaze flicked toward Belle, sharp and uncertain. The room fell into uneasy silence. Belle tightened her grip on the rag, her knuckles white. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted his gaze, his whisper, his wolf stirring at her presence. And yet, she could feel it pressing in on her from every side. The inevitability, the weight of something she could neither escape nor deny. Outside, the bells tolled midnight. In the ballroom above, nobles argued and the council schemed. But down here, in the servants' quarters, the truth was already spreading like wildfire. The king had called for Belle, and no one knew what that meant. Chapter 11. Dawn bled pale light through the high windows of the council chamber, but it did nothing to soften the tension that hung in the air. The ballroom had been cleared, the failed Omegas dismissed, yet the echoes of last night's disaster lingered like smoke. The Alpha King still lay unmoved upon his throne, golden eyes closed, his wolf restless beneath the surface. Every failed kiss, every desperate attempt had only deepened the unease gnawing at the court. The council sat in grim silence, their gray robes heavy with sleeplessness. Elder Marcellus rubbed his temples, his voice hoarse. The kingdom teeters on the edge of scandal. 50 attempts, and not one success. The gods mock us. Or perhaps, another elder muttered, the gods point elsewhere. His gaze flicked toward the empty space where Belle had stood the night before. The word hung unspoken, but everyone felt it. Lady Seraphina broke the silence. She swept into the chamber like a storm contained in silk, her violet eyes sharp, her raven hair gleaming in the morning light. Though her pride had been battered, her voice carried with practiced grace. "My lords," she said, bowing low, "last night was not failure. It was proof. Proof that the bond is already forged, with me. The gods test my devotion, but they will not deny me forever." Her words rang with conviction, but beneath her calm mask, her mind raced. She had seen the way the king's wolf stirred at the sound of another name. Belle. The maid's absence was a thorn in her side, but also a threat she could not ignore. She straightened, her voice honeyed now, coaxing. "Give me another chance, not before the court, not as spectacle, but in private, in sacred silence. Let me prove the bond without the eyes of doubters upon us." The elders exchanged wary glances. Some were tempted, desperate for resolution, desperate to avoid scandal. Others frowned, remembering her potion, her failure, her arrogance. Seraphina smiled, sharp and secret. She had failed once, but she would not fail again. If the gods would not hand her victory, she would take it with her own hands. And if the maid stood in her way, then the maid would have to be removed. Chapter 12. The chamber was thick with unease. The elders shifted in their seats, nobles muttered behind jeweled hands, and the Alpha King lay silent, his wolf restless beneath his skin. The memory of his whisper still clung to the air, unspoken, but undeniable. Seraphina bowed her head, her voice soft now, coaxing, almost reverent. "My lords, his majesty is clouded. His wolf is unsettled. He called a name, yes, but not with bond, not with meaning. To suggest otherwise would be to insult the crown itself. Would you have the realm believe the gods would bind our king to a maid?" The word dripped from her tongue like poison. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Some nobles seized on it eagerly, desperate for certainty. Others hesitated, but none dared speak against her. Elder Marcellus's jaw tightened. The king's whispers were fevered. They will not be recorded. The bond lies with one of noble blood, as it always has. "The maid is nothing," another elder said firmly, his voice carrying across the chamber. "A shadow in the palace halls. She cannot be queen." Relief flickered across the faces of the nobles. The ambassadors exchanged wary glances, but even they seemed mollified by the council's decree. The scandal was being buried, smothered beneath layers of denial. Seraphina lowered her eyes, hiding the sharp smile that tugged at her lips. She had steered them where she needed. The king's whisper was dismissed, stricken from the record as delirium. Belle was nothing. At least, that was what they would all pretend. Because Seraphina knew better. She had seen the way his wolf stirred, the way his golden eyes had sought the maid even in his haze. The council might deny it, the nobles might bury it, but the truth lingered like a thorn. And if the maid was a threat, then Seraphina would see her destroyed before the truth could ever rise. Chapter 13. The council chamber emptied slowly, the nobles dispersing with forced relief, their jeweled laughter brittle as glass. The decree had been made, the scandal buried, at least on the surface. But Seraphina lingered. She stood before the throne, her violet eyes fixed on the Alpha King's still form. His golden lashes lay against his cheek, his chest rising and falling in that maddeningly steady rhythm. He looked untouchable, eternal, yet she had seen it. The way his wolf stirred at the sound of another name, her lips curled. Belle. The name was a thorn, and thorns could be plucked. "Lady Seraphina!" A voice broke her reverie. One of her attendants, a slim-faced girl with nervous eyes, bowed low. "Shall I prepare your chambers?" Seraphina turned, her smile sharp as a blade. "No, prepare a list." The girl blinked. "A list, my lady?" "Of every servant who was present last night. Every maid, every footman, every shadow that might have heard the king's whisper." Her voice was velvet, but her eyes burned. Loose tongues spread faster than fire. "I will know who carries the spark." The attendant swallowed hard and bowed again. "At once, my lady." When she was gone, Seraphina swept closer to the throne. She leaned down, her jeweled fingers brushing the armrest, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "You are mine, Roderick. You always have been, and I will not let a nameless maid steal what belongs to me." His wolf growled low in his chest, restless, but his eyes did not open. Seraphina straightened, her gown whispering across the marble as she turned away. Already her mind spun with threads of intrigue, allies to charm, servants to silence, rumors to twist. The council might pretend Belle was nothing, the nobles might cling to their denial, but Seraphina knew better, and she would weave her web until the maid was caught and crushed within it. Chapter 14. The list arrived before dawn, ink still wet, parchment trembling in the hands of the attendant who delivered it. Seraphina read each name slowly, her violet eyes narrowing. Maids, footmen, guards, all who had been present when the Alpha King whispered. All who might have carried the rumor beyond the ballroom walls. "Summon them," she ordered. The attendant hesitated. "All of them, my lady." Her smile was cold. One by one. Fear spreads faster when it is personal. By mid-morning, the first maid was ushered into her chambers. The girl curtsied so low her forehead nearly touched the floor. Seraphina circled her like a predator, silk skirts whispering across the marble. "You were in the hall last night," Seraphina said softly. "You heard the king's voice." The maid's lips trembled. I heard nothing, my lady." "Good." Seraphina's smile was sweet, but her eyes burned. "Because if you had, and if you repeated it, I would know. And the punishment for treason is not kind." The girl paled, nodding furiously. One by one they came. Some stammered denials, others swore oaths, all left pale and shaken. By the time the last servant was dismissed, silence had settled over the palace staff like a shroud. But Seraphina was not finished. That evening she dined with two noblewomen whose tongues were as sharp as their jewels. She laughed, she charmed, she whispered carefully chosen words. By the time the candles burned low, the story had shifted. The king's whisper was fevered nonsense, a trick of the ear, nothing more. Rumors were fragile things. With enough pressure, they could be bent, reshaped, erased. And yet, as Seraphina retired to her chambers, she could not shake the memory of his wolf's growl, restless and unsatisfied. She pressed her hand to her chest, her nails biting into her palm. Belle. The name lingered like smoke, but Seraphina would not allow it to burn. Chapter 15. The council chamber was heavy with incense, the air thick with the bitter tang of herbs. At the foot of the throne, the royal healer knelt, her hands moving with practiced precision as she pressed poultices to the Alpha King's chest and whispered incantations older than the crown itself. His wolf resists me, she murmured, sweat beading her brow. It stirs restless, but will not yield. Something binds him beyond my reach. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. They wanted to believe her words, but fear gnawed at their composure. Lady Seraphina stood apart, her violet eyes gleaming in the candlelight. She folded her hands demurely, but her voice carried like silk over steel. The healer does her best, but the bond is the only true cure, and the bond is mine. The gods test me, but they will not deny me forever. The healer's head snapped up, her lined face stern. The bond is not proven, my lady. The king called another name. A ripple of unease swept the chamber. The forbidden truth, spoken aloud. Seraphina's smile did not falter, though her nails dug into her palms. Delirium, she said sweetly. The council has decreed it so. To suggest otherwise is to undermine their wisdom, and the crown itself. The elders shifted, caught between healer and noblewoman. Elder Marcellus cleared his throat, his voice sharp. The matter is settled. The king's whisper was fevered nonsense. We will not speak of it again. The healer bowed her head, but her eyes burned with quiet defiance. She returned to her work, muttering prayers under her breath, her hands steady despite the weight of the council's denial. Seraphina turned to the gathered nobles, her voice rising like a hymn. The kingdom must not falter. The bond will be revealed in time, and when it is, His Majesty will rise. Until then, we must stand united, not chasing shadows, not elevating servants above their station. The nobles murmured their assent, eager for certainty, desperate for order. But as Seraphina basked in their approval, her mind was already racing. The healer was dangerous, too bold, too willing to speak the truth. And Belle was the shadow that refused to be erased. Both would have to be dealt with. Chapter 16. The healer lingered at the Alpha King's side, her hands steady, her lips moving in low incantations. The chamber was hushed save for the crackle of incense and the faint growl rumbling in Roderick's chest. Seraphina watched her with narrowed eyes. The old woman's defiance was a thorn, and thorns had to be plucked carefully. Not with force, not yet, but with whispers. By midday, Seraphina had already begun. She drifted among the nobles gathered in the antechamber, her silks whispering across the marble, her smile soft and sympathetic. The healer is skilled, she murmured to one lord, her tone hushed as though reluctant to speak. But age weighs heavily on her. Did you not see her trembling hands, the sweat on her brow? I fear her judgment falters. The lord frowned, uncertain, but the seed was planted. Later, she leaned close to a jeweled lady, her voice low and conspiratorial. She speaks of bonds she cannot see, of names whispered in delirium. It is dangerous, is it not, to let superstition guide the fate of a kingdom? The lady's eyes widened, scandal blooming across her painted face. By evening, the whispers had spread. The healer was tired. The healer was failing. The healer was clinging to old magic that no longer answered her call. Seraphina returned to the council chamber with her mask of serenity firmly in place. She bowed low, her voice honeyed. My lords, I fear the healer's remedies, though well-intentioned, may cloud our judgment. She speaks of shadows, of names, of omens. But the bond is the only cure, and the bond is mine. Allow me to prove it, in sacred silence, away from the eyes of doubters. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Elder Marcellus's jaw tightened, but doubt flickered in his eyes. The healer stiffened, her lined face pale with fury, but her protests were drowned beneath the tide of murmurs. Seraphina hid her smile. The web was tightening. The healer's voice might still rise, but soon, no one would listen. Chapter 17. The council reconvened at dusk, the chamber crowded with nobles and ambassadors eager for reassurance. The Alpha King still lay unmoved, his golden eyes closed, his wolf restless beneath the surface. The healer knelt at his side, her hands steady, her lips whispering prayers that seemed to vanish into the heavy air. Seraphina stood near the dais, her violet eyes gleaming. She had sown her whispers well. Now it was time to reap. "My lords," she said, her voice carrying like a hymn, "we gather again to seek the truth. But truth must be clear, not clouded by failing senses or superstition." The healer's head snapped up, her lined face stern. "Failing senses? I have served this crown for 3 generations. My hands have healed kings before him. And I tell you now, his wolf stirs for another." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The forbidden words, spoken aloud again. Serafina pressed a hand to her chest, her expression one of pained sympathy. "You see, my lords, the healer is weary. Her devotion is unquestioned, but her mind falters. She clings to shadows, to whispers in delirium, and risks leading us astray." The nobles murmured, their unease shifting toward suspicion. The healer rose to her feet, her voice trembling with fury. "I speak the truth. The king called a name, and it was not yours, Lady Serafina. It was enough." Elder Martellus's staff struck the marble, the sound echoing like thunder. His face was carved from stone, but doubt flickered in his eyes. "You overstep, healer. The council has decreed the king's words were fevered nonsense. To defy that decree is to defy the crown itself." The healer faltered, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came. The weight of the council's judgment pressed down on her shoulders, bending her spine. Serafina lowered her gaze, hiding the sharp smile that tugged at her lips. She had not silenced the healer with force. She had let her own defiance undo her. The chamber buzzed with murmurs. The healer's authority was fractured, her voice tainted with doubt. And Serafina, radiant in her composure, stood untouched. But beneath her serene mask, her thoughts burned. The healer will not stop, and neither will the maid. Both must be dealt with, permanently. Chapter 18. The servants' hall was thick with smoke from the hearth, but the air felt colder than stone. Word of the healer's humiliation had spread faster than fire, carried on every tongue, twisted in every retelling. "They silenced her," one maid whispered, wringing her hands, "said she was mad." "Mad?" another scoffed, though her voice trembled. "She only spoke what we all heard. The king called a name." A hush fell. Dozens of eyes slid toward Belle. She froze, the rag in her hands damp with water, her heart pounding in her chest. "It was you," a young scullery boy blurted, his voice cracking. "He called for you." Belle's throat tightened. "He was delirious," she said quickly, echoing the council's decree. "You heard them. It meant nothing." But the words rang hollow, even to her own ears. The older maid, who had always kept her distance, stepped forward, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Nothing. The healer risked her standing to speak the truth, and now she is ruined. And you." Her eyes narrowed. "You stand here, silent, as if the gods themselves did not mark you." Belle shook her head, backing toward the wall. "I never asked for this. I never wanted—" "That doesn't matter," the woman cut in, her voice low and dangerous. "Wanted or not, the king called your name, and if Serafina hears the whispers still linger—" The threat hung heavy in the air. Belle's hands trembled. She could feel the weight of their stares, the fear, the resentment. She was no longer invisible. She was a danger, to herself and to anyone who stood too close. From the corner of the hall, the healer's apprentice slipped in, her face pale, her eyes darting. She caught Belle's gaze and shook her head ever so slightly, a warning. The message was clear. Serafina's reach was long, and Belle's time in the shadows was running out. Chapter 19. The summons came before dawn. 2 guards appeared in the servants' hall, their armor gleaming, their expressions unreadable. "Belle," one said curtly, "Lady Serafina requests your presence." The room fell silent. The other maids shrank back, eyes wide, as Belle's rag slipped from her trembling fingers. She wanted to protest, to vanish into the shadows, but the guards' hands were already at her elbows, guiding her through the winding corridors. They led her not to the council chamber, but to a smaller salon draped in velvet and gold. Candles flickered in tall holders, casting long shadows across the polished floor. At the center, seated like a queen already crowned, was Seraphina. Her violet eyes gleamed as Belle was ushered in. "Leave us," she said softly. The guards bowed and withdrew, the heavy doors closing with a thud that echoed like a verdict. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Seraphina rose, her gown whispering across the marble as she circled Belle like a predator. "So," she murmured, her voice smooth as silk, "the little maid who thinks herself chosen." Belle's throat tightened. "I think nothing, my lady. I never asked for—" "Never asked?" Seraphina's laugh was soft, sharp, and cruel. "And yet his wolf stirs at your presence. His lips form your name. Do you know what that makes you, Belle?" Belle shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "A mistake." Seraphina stopped before her, tilting her chin up with a jeweled finger. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes burned with venom. "A threat, and threats are removed." Belle's breath caught, her heart hammering. Seraphina leaned closer, her words a hiss meant only for her. "Stay silent. Keep to your shadows. If I hear your name whispered again, if I see your face turned toward him, I will make certain you vanish so completely the gods themselves will forget you." She released Belle's chin with a flick, turning away as though she had already dismissed her. "Go," she said lightly, her tone once more sweet and polished. "And remember your place." The doors opened, the guards waiting. Belle stumbled out, her knees weak, her chest tight. But as the doors closed behind her, she pressed a hand to her heart. Fear coiled in her veins, but beneath it, something else stirred. Something fierce, something unyielding. Seraphina had named her a threat, and perhaps, Belle thought with a shiver, that was exactly what she was. Chapter 20. Belle slipped through the servants' corridors long after the palace had gone still. Her heart still pounded with the echo of Seraphina's words, each threat coiled like a snake in her chest. She should have hidden, should have kept to the shadows as commanded. But instead, her steps carried her to the one place Seraphina would not want her to go. The healer's chamber smelled of crushed herbs and smoke. Candles burned low, their light flickering across shelves stacked with jars and scrolls. The old woman sat hunched at a table, her hands trembling slightly as she ground roots into powder. "You shouldn't be here," the healer said without looking up. Her voice was weary, but not unkind. "I had no one else," Belle whispered. At that, the healer raised her eyes. They were sharp still, despite the weight of humiliation pressed upon her by the council. She studied Belle for a long moment, then gestured to the stool across from her. "Sit." Belle obeyed, her hands twisting in her lap. "She threatened me," she confessed, her voice breaking. "Seraphina, she said if my name is spoken again, she'll make me vanish." The healer's mouth tightened. "That woman poisons everything she touches. But she is not wrong about one thing. You are a threat. Not because you sought it, but because the king's wolf has already chosen. That cannot be undone." Belle's breath caught. "Then what do I do?" The healer leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We cannot fight her alone, but there is one who might stand against her. The king's brother." Belle blinked. "His brother." "Away on campaign," the healer said, her eyes gleaming with a spark of hope. "You have not met him, but he is loyal to the crown, not to Seraphina's schemes. If he returns, he could shield you, shield the king, and force the council to listen." Belle's pulse quickened. "Then we must send for him." The healer nodded, already reaching for parchment. "A message must go tonight before Seraphina tightens her grip further. She thinks she has silenced me, but she has not silenced the truth. And now, she has not silenced you." Belle swallowed hard, fear and determination warring in her chest. For the first time, she felt the faint outline of a path forward, dangerous, uncertain, but real. As the healer's quill scratched across the parchment, Belle whispered to herself, steadying her hands. "She called me a threat. Then let me be one." Chapter 21. The healer sealed the parchment with wax, pressing her trembling hand against the crest carved into the stamp. The faint scent of melted resin filled the chamber, mingling with the bitter herbs that clung to the air. Belle watched, her fingers twisting in her lap. "Will it reach him?" she asked softly. The healer's eyes flicked up, sharp despite her weariness. "It must. I will entrust it to one who owes me a debt, a rider swift and silent. But once it leaves these walls, we can only pray it finds him before Seraphina finds us." Belle's stomach nodded. "If she learns—" "She will," the healer said bluntly, tying the ribbon tight around the scroll. "Seraphina's ears are everywhere, but by the time she suspects, the message will already be beyond her reach." The words were meant to comfort, but Belle heard the unspoken truth. Suspicion would fall on them both. The healer leaned back, studying her. "You must be careful, child. Keep your head bowed, your hands busy. Let her believe she has frightened you into silence. That is your shield." Belle nodded, though her chest ached with the weight of it. "And if she presses harder?" "Then you endure," the healer said, her voice low but steady, "until the brother returns. He is not like her. He will not let her poison consume the crown." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the candle flame. Belle drew a shaky breath, then whispered, "Why me? Why would the king's wolf call for me when I am no one?" The healer's gaze softened. "Because the gods do not measure worth in jewels or titles. They see deeper, and sometimes they choose the one no one else would dare." Belle lowered her eyes, her heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and hope. The healer rose, pressing the sealed message into the hands of her apprentice, who had been waiting silently by the door. "Go," she commanded. "Ride hard, and do not stop until this reaches the prince's hand." The girl nodded, vanishing into the night with the message clutched to her chest. Belle exhaled slowly, her palms damp. The die was cast. The healer placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm. "You are not nothing, Belle. Remember that. Seraphina knows it. That is why she fears you." Belle swallowed hard, her fear tempered by a flicker of resolve. For the first time, she believed it might be true. Chapter 22. The council chamber was summoned at dawn. Bells tolled low and heavy, calling nobles, ambassadors, and elders into the marble hall. The Alpha King still lay unmoved upon his throne, his golden eyes closed, his wolf restless beneath the surface. At the center of it all stood Seraphina, radiant in violet silk, her raven hair gleaming like a crown. Her voice rang clear, smooth as honey, sharp as steel. "My lords, my ladies," she began, bowing with practiced grace. "The kingdom teeters on the edge of ruin. Whispers spread like plague, whispers of servants of false visions, of healers who cling to madness. This cannot continue. For the sake of the crown, for the sake of our people, we must act." The chamber stirred uneasily. Elder Marcellus frowned. "What do you propose, Lady Seraphina?" Her violet eyes gleamed. "Remove the rot. Silence the lies. The healer has failed her duty. And the maid. The maid is nothing, yet both sow unrest. If they vanish, so too will the whispers." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some nobles nodded, desperate for order. Others shifted uneasily, unwilling to speak against her. The healer, standing at the edge of the dais, stiffened but said nothing. Belle, summoned under guard, kept her head bowed, her heart hammering in her chest. Seraphina spread her arms, her voice rising like a hymn. "The gods demand purity. The bond is mine. But until His Majesty rises, we must cut away the weeds that choke the garden. Let us end this farce before it destroys us all." The council murmured, the weight of her words pressing down like a storm. Elder Marcellus raised his staff, ready to call the vote, and then the doors burst open. A gust of cold air swept the chamber as armored boots struck the marble. A tall figure strode inside, his cloak dusted with the grit of travel, his eyes burning with the same golden fire as the king's. The hall fell silent. "Enough," the newcomer said, his voice carrying like thunder. "This council will not condemn healer or maid. Not while I draw breath." Gasps echoed. Belle's head snapped up, her breath catching. The king's brother had returned. Chapter 23. The chamber quaked with silence after his words. All eyes turned to the man who had entered, his presence filling the hall like a storm breaking over still waters. The resemblance was undeniable. The same golden fire in his eyes, the same proud line of his jaw. Yet where the Alpha King lay unmoving, his brother stood tall, his voice alive with fury. "Seraphina," he said, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. "What has happened here? What has been done to my brother?" Seraphina's mask did not falter. She dipped into a graceful bow, her violet eyes gleaming with false humility. "My lord, you return at a time of great trial. The king fell into this state after a cruel twist of fate. We have sought the bond to wake him, but the gods test us still. I have done all in my power to preserve the crown." The brother's gaze hardened. "All in your power? Or all in your ambition?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. Seraphina's smile tightened, but before she could answer, the healer stepped forward. Her voice, though weary, rang with the weight of truth. "My prince," she said, bowing low. "You deserve to know what the council has buried." It was Seraphina who gave him the potion, a draught meant to bind his heart to hers. It clouded his wolf, shackled his spirit, and when she failed to wake him, she paraded 50 others before him, each kiss a spectacle of desperation. Gasps erupted. Nobles clutched their pearls. Ambassadors exchanged sharp whispers. The healer's voice grew stronger, fueled by long-suppressed defiance. And yet, through all their failures, his wolf stirred only once. He whispered a name, Belle, not Seraphina, not any of the chosen. A maid. The chamber erupted into chaos. Seraphina's composure cracked, her eyes flashing with venom. "Lies!" she spat, her voice sharp as glass. "The healer is mad, her mind broken by age. She twists shadows into truths to undermine me." But the brother raised a hand, and the hall fell silent once more. His golden eyes burned as he looked from Seraphina to Belle, who stood trembling under the weight of so many stares. "Then let us have no more whispers," he said, his voice steady, commanding. "If my brother called her name, then the gods themselves have spoken. And I will see the truth laid bare, no matter who stands against it." The chamber held its breath. Seraphina's smile returned, brittle and sharp. "Be careful, my lord. Truth can be a dangerous thing." But for the first time, she no longer held the room in her grasp. Chapter 24. The silence in the chamber was suffocating, every noble and elder holding their breath as the king's brother stood tall before the throne. His golden eyes burned as he turned to the healer. "You have spoken of what was done," he said, his voice steady, commanding. "Now tell me, what is the cure?" The healer bowed her head, her voice low but clear. "The bond, my lord. Only the true mate's kiss can rouse him. Nothing else will break the potion's hold." A ripple of unease swept through the chamber. Seraphina's lips curved into a brittle smile, as though she had expected this answer. But the brother did not look at her. His gaze swept the hall, sharp as a blade. "Then we will find her," he declared. "The bond cannot be forged by lies or ambition. It is truth, and truth alone. The highborn Omegas have tried and failed. If the gods did not choose them, then we must look where none of you dared." He paused, his words striking like thunder. "The maids, the servants of this palace. Let them come forward. Let them try." The chamber erupted. "This is madness," cried a jeweled lord, his face red with outrage. "Unthinkable," hissed a lady, clutching her pearls. "To place a servant's lips upon the king. Sacrilege." An ambassador spat. The council broke into a storm of murmurs, voices rising, hands gesturing wildly. The very foundations of their order trembled at the thought. Seraphina's eyes blazed, her composure cracking. "You would disgrace the crown," she hissed, her voice sharp as steel. "To drag the king into the muck of the servants' hall? This is blasphemy." But the brother did not flinch. His voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "Blasphemy is to deny the god's will. If the bond lies with a servant, then so be it. Better truth in rags than lies in silk." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Belle's heart pounded in her chest. She felt the weight of every gaze, the whispers curling around her like smoke. She wanted to shrink, to vanish, but the brothers' golden eyes found hers, steady and unyielding. And in that moment, she knew there would be no hiding. Chapter 25. The chamber still buzzed with outrage when the brother lifted his hand. Silence fell, reluctant but heavy. "Chief Maid," he commanded, his voice ringing through the hall. "Summon every servant girl of this palace. Let them stand before the throne. Let the gods decide." The chief maid, pale and trembling, bowed low. "At once, my lord." Gasps rippled through the nobles. Some protested, their jeweled hands slicing the air. "This is beneath the crown." A spectacle of shame. But the brothers' golden eyes silenced them. The great doors opened, and the servants were ushered in. Dozens of maids, their plain gowns stark against the marble, shuffled forward with wide eyes and bowed heads. They looked like lambs led into a den of wolves, their fear thick in the air. Seraphina's lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. She stood tall, her violet gaze sweeping the line of trembling girls. "So this is what we have come to," she murmured, her voice dripping with disdain, the crown reduced to beggar's scraps. The brother ignored her. He turned to the healer. "You will oversee this trial. Guide them." The healer bowed, her lined face solemn. "Yes, my lord." And so it began. One by one, the maids were led to the throne. Each bent low, trembling, and pressed a kiss to the Alpha King's lips. Each time, the hall held its breath. Each time, nothing happened. His chest rose and fell in that same steady rhythm, his golden eyes closed, his wolf restless but unmoved. Murmurs grew louder with every failure. Nobles sneered, ambassadors whispered of disgrace. Seraphina's smile sharpened, her confidence returning with each passing attempt. And still the line dwindled. Belle stood at the very end, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles ached. She could feel Seraphina's gaze burning into her, could hear the whispers curling around her name. The healer's apprentice slipped close, her voice a whisper meant only for Belle. "Hold fast, you are the last, and the last may yet be chosen." Belle swallowed hard, her heart hammering. She wanted to run, to vanish, but her feet were rooted to the marble. One by one, the others failed, until at last, all eyes turned to her. Chapter 26. The chamber was silent, the weight of expectation pressing down like stone. "Bring forth the last," the brother commanded, his golden eyes never leaving Belle. The guards stepped aside, and the healer's apprentice gave Belle a gentle nudge. Her legs felt like lead, but somehow they carried her forward. Each step echoed across the marble, louder than the murmurs that rippled through the court. "She is nothing," a noble hissed. "A servant," another sneered. "Blasphemy," Seraphina whispered, her voice sharp as a blade. But none dared stop her. Belle reached the foot of the throne. The Alpha King lay as he had for so long, golden eyes closed, chest rising and falling in that steady rhythm, his wolf restless beneath the surface. He looked untouchable, eternal, and yet so fragile in his stillness. Her hands trembled as she sank to her knees. She could feel the weight of the court pressing down on her back, the heat of Seraphina's glare burning into her skin. The healer's voice broke the silence, low but steady. "Do not fear, child. The bond will answer, or it will not. The gods alone decide." Belle drew a shaky breath. She leaned forward, her lips brushing softly against the king's. For a heartbeat, nothing. The chamber held its breath. Then, a growl, low, deep, and resonant, rumbling from the king's chest. His wolf stirred, restless no longer but rising, straining against the chains of the potion. Gasps erupted, nobles clutched at one another, ambassadors shouted in disbelief. The brothers' eyes blazed with triumph. Belle pulled back, her breath caught in her throat. The king's golden eyes fluttered, the faintest flicker of light breaking through the haze. Seraphina's face drained of color, her composure shattering. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. No, this cannot be. But the truth was undeniable. The Alpha King had stirred, and it was Belle who had woken him. Chapter 27. The chamber exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted over one another, their jeweled hands slicing the air. Ambassadors muttered of omens and upheaval, their voices sharp with fear. The council pounded their staffs, calling for order that would not come. The gods have spoken, one cried. A servant cannot be queen, another roared. This is treachery. Seraphina's scream cut through it all, raw and jagged. Lies. Trickery. She bewitched him. Her violet eyes blazed, her composure shattered, her voice cracking with fury. This cannot be the bond. It cannot. The brother stepped forward, his golden gaze burning. You would deny what all have seen? The king stirred. His wolf answered. The bond is hers. But Belle heard none of it. Her heart thundered in her chest, her breath shallow and ragged. The weight of 100 eyes pressed down on her, their whispers curling like smoke, suffocating her. She stumbled back from the throne, her hands trembling. She is nothing, a noble spat. Nothing, echoed another. Belle turned and ran. Her skirts tangled around her legs as she fled the chamber, the marble floor cold beneath her feet. The roar of voices followed her down the corridors, echoing like a storm she could not escape. She did not stop until she reached the servants' hall, her chest heaving, her vision blurred with tears. She pressed her back against the stone wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold floor, her hands clutching at her pounding heart. She had kissed the king. She had woken him. And now the world would never let her go. Chapter 28. The chamber still trembled with chaos when the Alpha King's eyes fluttered open. Golden light flickered in their depths, faint but undeniable. His wolf growled low, a sound that silenced the hall more effectively than any council staff. Brother? His voice was hoarse, strained, but alive. The younger prince dropped to one knee beside him, relief flashing across his face. You are with us. Hold fast. The poison is breaking. The healer stepped forward, her lined face solemn. Not poison, my king. A potion. A draught brewed to bind your heart against the god's will. Gasps rippled through the chamber. All eyes turned to Seraphina. Her mask cracked, fury and desperation twisting her features. Lies! She seeks to ruin me. I did only what was necessary to preserve the crown. But the brother rose, his golden gaze burning. Enough. The truth is plain. You dosed him with your potion, paraded your chosen before him, and when the gods denied you, you sought to bury the bond in silence. You would have destroyed the kingdom to sate your ambition. The elders shifted uneasily, but none spoke in her defense. Elder Marcellus's jaw tightened as he struck his staff against the marble. The crime is clear. To tamper with the bond is to defy the gods themselves. The Alpha King's voice, though weak, carried the weight of command. Seraphina, you are banished. Leave these halls and never return. Seraphina staggered back as though struck. Her violet eyes blazed with hatred, her lips curling into a snarl. You think this ends me? You think a servant girl can take what is mine? Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. The gods are cruel and so am I. Remember that when she falls. Guards moved forward, seizing her arms. She struggled, her fury echoing through the chamber, but the elders did not intervene. None dared. The great doors closed behind her with a resounding boom and silence fell. The king sagged against the throne, his strength waning, but his eyes burned with new clarity. Find her, he rasped. Find Belle. The brother bowed his head. She fled, but I will bring her back. She is yours, and the kingdom must see it. The healer placed a hand over her heart, her voice steady. The bond has spoken. No council, no noble, no schemer can deny it now. And though the chamber was heavy with shock, the truth could no longer be buried. The king had stirred. Seraphina had fallen, and Belle was the one the gods had chosen. Chapter 29. The chamber was still heavy with the echo of Seraphina's banishment when the Alpha King gripped the arms of his throne. His fingers trembled, his body weak, but his golden eyes burned with a fire that silenced every murmur. "I will not wait," he rasped, his voice hoarse but unyielding. "She fled because of fear. Fear born of your whispers, your scorn. If she is lost to me now, the bond may never mend. I will find her myself." The brother stepped forward quickly, alarm flashing across his face. "Roderick, you are not yet strong enough. Let me go in your stead. Rest, and I will bring her back." But the king shook his head, his wolf growling low in his chest. "No, my wolf calls for her. It is not your place to answer. It is mine." The healer bowed deeply, her voice steady but urgent. "My king, your strength is not yet whole. The potion's chains are broken, but their shadow lingers. If you falter—" "I will not falter," he cut in, his voice rising with sudden force. The chamber trembled with the weight of his will. "I lay in silence while lies ruled these halls. No longer. The gods chose her, and I will not let her slip into the shadows again." The elders exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared oppose him. Elder Marcellus struck his staff once, his voice solemn. "Then so be it. The king has spoken." The brother's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. "If you will go, then I will ride at your side. None will stand in your way." The Alpha King rose, unsteady at first, but each step grew stronger as his wolf surged within him. His golden eyes gleamed with determination. "Prepare the horses," he commanded. "Tonight we ride, and I will not rest until Belle is found." The chamber bowed before him, but in the shadows of the hall, whispers stirred. Whispers of nobles unsettled, of power shifting, of a servant girl who had become the center of destiny. And far from the throne room, Belle sat trembling in the servants' hall, unaware that the king himself was coming for her. Chapter 30. The servants' hall was dark, lit only by the dying glow of the hearth. Belle sat curled against the stone wall, her arms wrapped around her knees, her breath uneven. She had tried to vanish into the shadows, but the bond would not let her hide. The doors creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed across the floor. "Belle," her head snapped up. He stood there, the Alpha King, his golden eyes burning even in the dim light, his frame unsteady but unbroken. His wolf's presence filled the room, a low growl of longing and command. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering. "You shouldn't be here, you're weak. You should be resting." "I will rest when you are at my side," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Not before." Belle shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "No, you don't understand. You change women, Roderick, one after another, paraded before you. I've seen it. I've heard the whispers. I can't be another name in a line of broken hearts." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You think I chose them? That I wanted them?" His voice cracked with raw honesty. "It was Seraphina's doing. Her potion, her lies. My wolf never stirred for them. Not once. Only for you." Belle's breath caught. "But I'm nothing. A servant. They'll never accept me." His hand lifted, trembling, and he cupped her cheek. "You are everything. The gods chose you. My wolf chose you. And I will burn this kingdom to ash before I let them take you from me." Her tears spilled, her resolve breaking under the weight of his words. "Roderick." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "You are not another. You are the only, my mate, my bond, my heart." For a moment the world held still. No whispers, no counsel, no Seraphina. Only them. Belle's lips trembled as she whispered, "Then prove it." And he did. His mouth claimed hers, fierce and tender all at once, the kiss sealing what the gods had already written. His wolf roared within him, triumphant, and Belle felt the bond surge through her veins like fire and light. When they broke apart, breathless, his golden eyes shone with certainty. "You are mine, Belle, and I am yours. Nothing will change that." For the first time, she believed it. Chapter 31. The dawn bells tolled across the kingdom, their solemn chime echoing through stone and sky. The council had no choice. The Alpha King had risen, The bond had been revealed, and the gods themselves had spoken. The great hall was draped in banners of gold and crimson. Nobles filled the chamber, their jeweled eyes sharp with disbelief, envy, or reluctant awe. At the center, upon the dais, Roderick stood tall, his golden gaze unyielding, and beside him, in a gown of white silk that shimmered like moonlight, stood Belle. The murmurs rippled like a tide. A servant, a maid, a queen. The healer's voice rang clear, carrying the weight of tradition. The bond is sacred. The bond is eternal. Before gods and men, the Alpha King and his chosen stand as one. Roderick turned to Belle, his hand finding hers. His voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the hall. They will whisper, they will doubt, but none of it matters. You are mine, Belle, and today, the world will see it. Her breath trembled, but she met his gaze, steady now. Then let them see. The crown was placed upon his brow, the weight of kingship renewed. Then, in a gesture that shattered centuries of tradition, he lifted a second circlet, wrought of silver and flame, and set it upon Belle's head. Gasps filled the chamber. Some nobles rose in protest, but the brother's voice thundered over them. The gods have chosen. The bond is unbreakable. To deny her is to deny the crown itself. And so it was done. The coronation ended in thunderous silence. The kingdom forever changed. The storm of politics had faded, but in the royal chambers the air was alive, thick with roses, firelight, and the pulse of something inevitable. Belle stood at the window, crown abandoned, her hands trembling against the glass as though she could hold herself upright by sheer will. I don't know how to be what they expect, she whispered, her voice breaking like a fragile thread. Roderick's presence filled the room before his touch did. His shadow fell over her, his warmth pressed against her back, his voice a low growl at her ear. You don't need to be what they expect. You only need to be mine. She turned, her eyes shimmering with doubt and longing. And if I falter? His hand rose, calloused fingers brushing a tear from her cheek with aching tenderness. Then I will hold you. If you fall, I will rise with you. You are not alone, Belle, not ever again. Her resolve cracked, her lips parting on a shaky breath. Then take me as I am. And he did. The kiss began softly, a brush of lips that trembled with restraint. But restraint could not hold. It deepened, slow and consuming. A rhythm that built and broke like waves against the shore. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that stole her breath, his hands anchoring her as though she might vanish if he let go. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and the world outside ceased to exist. The firelight painted them in gold, their shadows merging on the wall, the bond between them burning hotter than flame. He pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling, ragged and uneven. You are mine, he whispered, voice rough with need, and I am yours. Belle's heart pounded, her body trembling with the force of it. She felt the bond surge through her veins, heat, light, fire, until she could no longer tell where she ended and he began. Every brush of lips, every shiver of breath was a vow. Every heartbeat was a surrender. The kiss grew deeper, slower, more insistent, not frantic, but inevitable, like a tide that could not be turned back. His wolf surged within him, hers answered in silence, and the air itself seemed to tremble with the force of their union. Her hands clutched at him, not in fear, but in surrender, as though she had finally let go of the weight she had carried alone. And in that surrender, she found strength. The kingdom might rage, the nobles might whisper, but here, in the quiet of their chambers, there was only them, king and queen, mate and bond, heart and flame. And when at last they broke apart, breathless and trembling, Belle knew with a certainty that silenced every doubt. She was no longer nothing. She was his, and he was hers. Thank you so much for listening to my new story. I really hope you enjoyed it, the tension, the tenderness, the fire. If this world pulled you in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a little escape. And if you want more chapters, more heat, more heart, drop a comment below. I read everyone. Until next time, stay wild, stay curious, and never stop believing in the bond.